Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another video with the pre-release for set 12 coming up very soon. I figured it was time to do one of the channel staples here. I figured it was time to talk about 10 cards you should be on the lookout for from set 12. These are going to be as generic as possible. I'm going to explain why I think you should pick these up. They're not really going to be for one deck that you're playing. I'm trying to make this very generic, also very budget. Only one SR in the list, which I do predict to actually be quite cheap. So these should all be budget pickups. These should all be very applicable no matter really what deck you're playing. It might be color locked, but that's going to be pretty rare as well. So if you guys are new here, definitely subscribe, hit that bell so you don't miss a video. If you want to help the channel out, go down in the description. There are many links that will help out. Today in particular, guys, you can go to use my link to TCG Player if you want to buy or pre-order any of these cards. It really does help out a lot. That being said, let's jump into the first card. So the first thing you guys are going to want to pick up from set 12 is going to be a playset of each of the Rejuvenate super combos. So basically for each color, there is a super combo that says the following. If your leader card is the correct color and you have the correct color unison in play, you can super combo this card and draw one, right? So this one here is the one for Slug, and this one's the weird example. I probably should have went with a different one because this one has 5k combo power as opposed to the rest of them that have 10k combo power. So the rest of them are pretty normal. This one's just weird because Slug itself is a 20k leader on its awakened side, so I kind of understand why they went with the 5k power there. But nonetheless, you're going to want to pick up a playset of each of them because they're going to be in the uncommon slot. A non-foil playset of each is going to be, you know, pennies on the dollar. It's going to be a really good pickup. And you just don't know, like, what future strategies are going to have Rejuvenate unisons, right? Like, you know, you might not be interested in Slug, you might not be interested in Pycon, but you want to have these super combos just for the future in the sense that, you know, your strategy might get legacy support that might have Rejuvenate, or there might be a new strategy that comes out that will have a Rejuvenate unison, and you're just going to kind of wish that you had these super combos. So firstly, definitely recommending a playset of each of these super combos. Just put them in your binder, put them away. Don't think about them until a new card with Rejuvenate comes out that interests you. Next up, talking about Peel Off, the gang's all here. So this one is definitely color locked, although there are a few decks you can play this card in. So giving it a quick read, auto, if your leader card is a red Earthling only card, at the end of a turn where this card was played from your hand, play up to 2 red skillless battle cards with energy cost of 1 from your deck, then shuffle your deck. So along with printing this card in set 12, they're also printing a 1-drop Shu and a 1-drop Mai. So obviously that, you know, kind of indirectly, or I guess you could say directly, supports the peel off strategy, which we know at this point it's a pretty acceptable rogue deck. You know, it's done some stuff in some online events. It's very budget, so it's very much a budget friendly rogue deck, which is pretty cool. So playing this in that deck obviously gets you your guys on the field, and to be honest, I'm not like super well versed in the peel off strategy, so if there is some way that can help you out, that's really cool. But the number one reason I'm recommending picking this up, it is pretty deck specific, but it's if you're playing Bulma. Now Bulma is a really cool one to look at because there are so many different ways to customize Bulma. I mean, just in this past weekend's event, we saw red green Bulma do really well. We saw Gogeta Bulma win the event. I even think there are more just mono red good stuff types of Bulma that can do some pretty cool things. This is a really cool engine going into set 12, particularly for the Gogeta archetype, but also for Red Bulma in general, because for 2 energy, you're producing 3 blockers. So if you play this in the Gogeta Bulma variant, you can play this, you can play out your Goku and your Vegeta skillless, and then you get 3 blockers going into your opponent's next turn. The following turn, you know, that'll be your turn 2 play. The following turn, you can go into your Gogeta Fusion and stuff like that. But this also opens up the avenues for like other Bulma skillless builds that may or may not be, you know, playable or good. But it is a really cool thing to try out in Bulma because of that 2 energy ability to produce 3 blockers. So definitely want to recommend that one for you. This is the one SR we're talking about in this video, Frieza and Cell, a match made in hell. Wow, I didn't realize that rhymed until I read it out loud. But anyways, this is a 2-drop blue unison. It has Rejuvenate, has an auto that lets you cycle a card from the top of your deck when one of your battle cards is bounced. But that's not always going to be live, and that's not really what we're worrying about here. The main reason I'm recommending this card to you is because of this +1. Activate main, choose 1 blue battle card in your hand with an energy cost of 1 and play it. So I really don't predict this SR to be very expensive because I don't really think a lot of people are going to be into Pycon, at least in the beginning of set 12, if ever, right? I just don't think it's going to be that popular of a strategy. So this should be one of those really cheap SRs that's like maybe $5 the maximum. I can honestly see it being lower than that, and that's one of the reasons I'm recommending you pick it up. But the other reason is because that +1 is really good and really generic. So of course you have like a deck like Pycon where this is going to be one of your best unisons you can play. You can also of course play Zeno Cosmic Unison, but this is a solid one in Pycon. But another deck I was thinking about with this very unison was actually an Announcer, because with this card, an Announcer, you pay the 2 energy, and then for the rest of the game, as long as this card survives, you can pay 1, play Dende for free. Pay 1, play Awakening Talent Pan for free. Basically, as long as you invested just your 2 energy into this card, this can translate to more free energy later on in the game. So it seems like it can do some cool things in like really extended games, like between 2 mid-range decks or between like 2 control decks. I really just think there are going to be some scenarios where this unison can do a lot of things by just playing a 1-drop for free. So I think it's pretty solid. Want to recommend it to you guys. Next up, we're looking at Sun Goku Fusion Synergy. So this is a card that I guess more so back in the day was recommended as a staple. This is basically just an attack, take a life, gains plus 10k crit. We haven't really seen these guys get a ton of play in more recent sets. The only ones I can really think about right now are Newfound Power Sun Gohan. People are playing that card in Reboot Gohan. But I think it's still a card you want to just have in your arsenal. Again, grab a play set. It's an uncommon. It's going to be really, really cheap. Put it in your binder. Don't think about it. But one day when you decide to play like a, resource denial type of blue deck, which, blue can play a pretty long game. So I can definitely see a world in which this card becomes relevant again. You're going to want this card at your disposal. Likewise, more Gogeta support comes out. You're going to want this card as a fusion target, because now in set 12, which is arguably another recommendation you could pick up, there is a 1-drop blue Vegeta that also has 5k power. So between that and this, you can use those as Gogeta fusion targets. This is a really cheap Goku to get on the field and use as a Vegito fusion target. So it's just a card that, because his name is Goku, because it's a 1-drop crit attacker that self-awakens you, I can see a lot of scenarios in which you're going to want to have this card at your disposal when you need it. Next up, Great Sandman, Punisher of Evil. This is a card that I find super, super cool coming out of set 12. So let's give it a quick read. It's a 3-drop, 15k, 3 specific blue energy. Deflect, Barrier, Blocker, Revenge. Okay, so that combination of keywords already tells you, like, you play this guy, your opponent cannot do anything to him except try and, like, beat over him or hit him with barrier removal, which we know is relatively rare in the format. Auto once per turn, when this card KOs an opponent's battle card, switch this card and up to one of your mono blue energy to active mode. So I was actually just recently trying to experiment with this card in terms of, like, just being an anti-aggro measure. So, like, I figured, if you could play this against Red Broly relatively early, it seems like a really good card to just, like, basically treat as your leader. It has Revenge, so anything that swings into it is going to die. You can obviously block whatever you want to, and then it gets the restand ability to then maybe KO something else and block something else. The thing with this card is, I think it's mostly common sense that this thing is going to be best utilized in a deck that can ramp and then play it. So I think the best one for this is probably going to be SS3 Reboot. And then besides that, I was actually trying it out in Trunks Life Ramp, and it was pretty interesting. It really kind of started to feel like an anti-aggro only build. That's not necessarily what I wanted for this card and the strategy, but I'm just saying that I've been experimenting with this card, and I really do think that it has some potential in the future, whether we get a new ramp strategy or maybe the meta slows down by 1 turn and then casting this guy for 3 actually is like a really viable strategy, because again, he basically is a leader. His keywords also make him uninteractable like a leader, unless, again, barrier removal, but that's not super popular right now. So I think this is a card you definitely want to have. Seems really, really cool, in my opinion, to mess around with. Next up, Raditz Invader from Afar. So just being completely honest, this unison is not as good when compared to the Dark Broly SR unison from set 11, but he's not the worst thing. So the +1 is very similar to Dark Broly's +2. You and your opponent both pitch a card, but instead of your opponent losing a battle card, you choose one of your cards and it gains critical. So one of the reasons I'm saying pick this up, besides the fact that it is just a budget unison, is that there are going to be some formats where removal isn't necessarily super important, right? So as where Dark Broly is a +2, so that's just, kind of just better than being a +1. But if Dark Broly's removal wasn't super relevant, you can get this guy into play and basically just start playing resource denial. Pitch a card, your opponent pitches a card, maybe you pitched a Rebrand, maybe you pitched a Roshi Kamehameha Origins, and then you give this guy crit for a big 20k crit, or your leader crit. I can see that being solid, and the -5 is just kind of good. Your opponent chooses 3 cards in their hand, discards them. That can definitely help you out going for game if you are doing a successful job of denying your opponent's resources. So I would definitely say pick it up for a future where it's not so bad. Dimensional Meddler. Sorry I couldn't get a better image of this one, guys. For some reason, this is like the only card in set 12 that didn't have a good picture quality. But anyways, it's just a generic Unison with Rejuvenate. If your life's at 3 or less and you remove 5 markers from it, you can add the top card of your deck to your life pool. And then +1, you just pitch 1, you draw 1. It's got good cycle. It's a generic Rejuvenate. So, you know, I guess it's kind of weird because there is a Rejuvenate for every single color. But if you wanted a Unison in play on turn 1 to start using the cycle effect, this one is a generic one, so I do recommend grabbing it. Son Goku True Fighting Spirit. This card is probably the #1 pickup on this entire list, if I'm being completely honest. This is going to be very much akin to Dark Power Black Mass Sand, in that just playing it is going to be an absolute headache for your opponent. So 1-drop Deflect, I don't even think it needed to have Deflect, but it's just cool that it does. It is a Self-Awakener like BMS, and then auto once per turn. If your leader card is a black sand card, when your opponent activates a counter skill, they choose a card in their hand and sends it to their warp. So we have a lot more black sand cards now that we have like set 10, 11, 12. We got like Goku Xeno, we got Gogeta Xeno and that kind of stuff. So there are a lot of decks to play this guy in, and if your opponent is playing like blue with a lot of counter attacks, if they're playing green with Charismatic Villain, you can pretty much punish them for that and also get some Self-Awakening if you need it. So very, very flexible card. Awesome thing to pick up in my opinion. Next up, we have Vegeta True Fighting Spirit. So much less of an important pickup than Goku, but it is not too bad. So if your leader's a black sand card, when your opponent switches their energy to active mode with a non-awakened skill, they choose a card in their hand and send it to the warp. So this can be a good side deck option against things like Soul Striker or decks that are using Sensu Bean aggressively. So it is a common card I think you'll want to have if you're more interested in black decks, especially things like Goku Xeno and some of the more recent stuff we've gotten. Final card for today's video, guys, Dark King's Flash. This is a card that any deck can side deck. It's a 1-drop counter attack, but also has an activate main. If your opponent has 5 or more energy, your opponent can't play battle cards using leader card skills until the end of their next turn. So this card is pretty much anti-Sin Shenron. It is a really good side deck because Sin is getting a lot of good support out of set 12. For 3 sets in a row, they've gotten a lot of great support. The deck is looking to be quite solid going into set 12. So I would recommend picking this up if your deck, you know, wants to play a bit of a longer game. You kind of don't want to auto lose to Sin's tap 6, right? So you play this, kind of don't have to worry about it. Also flexible that it can just negate an attack, so I definitely recommend it. But guys, that's gonna end today's video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Let me know in the comments below which of these cards you'll be picking up, and I'll see you next time.